You ask such good questions.
We sleep before that.
We spoke about adolescence.
Great.
Yes, yeah.
Great.
ACEs.
We did a little bit, yeah, absolutely, and the tasks were quite closely related to that as well. Brilliant. What else?
Traits.
Great, and what do we mean by that?
Trauma-informed practices.
Absolutely, yeah. Why is that important, and how does a life course approach enable us to reflect on traits?
Because we are able to look back through a person's life, look at their social environment, their physical environment, any traumatic things that happened in their lives, and then perhaps refreshing things about where they are now in their health, why they do what they do.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about being informed, quite right, that the behaviour that we see now might not be just that. It would likely be informed by the person's life course, what's gone on in the past. It's about understanding the past as well as the present. Superb. Thinking about the theory then, what kind of things did we focus on in terms of adolescence? What does an adolescent person experience socially?
Hormones.
Yeah, so biological changes, absolutely.
Social things from moving from childhood to adolescence.
For sure. Such as?
Adapting into things like high school and things like peer groups, influences.
Superb.
Society.
Superb. And finally then, how does that connect to house?
If you're in a peer group, it can sometimes be not the right sort of peer group, so you can be influenced by the things that go on.
Absolutely, yeah. So from a psychological perspective, the stimulus that's available to us increases. Yeah, it's not just a kind of learning relationship between yourself and your parent, a trust relationship between yourself and your parent, a reliance between yourself and your parent, but that reliance grows and grows and grows. And we're thinking about school networks, but also what's online and all that kind of stuff. Connecting that to health, we know that can have a massive impact on, yes, our diets and our physical activity, but also things like body image.
Bullying.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we're thinking about things like stigma, and that's where, again, the theory comes in. So we're looking at concepts of identity and how our identity might be constructed in relationship to those around us. Does that all ring some bells? Yeah? Superb. So this week we're looking at adulthood. This is our last session that's directly targeted towards different parts of the life course. So we've gone on a real whistle-stop tour of someone's life course. Started with the first 1,000 days, then we looked at childhood and adolescence. Today we're looking at adulthood, but also a nod to ageing in general, so adulthood into later adulthood. When we come back after development week, we go straight into our social theories and our psychological models. We flip the content slightly there in that we're going to start with the sociological theories for the first 2 weeks and then move into psychological models for the second 2 weeks. And the reason for that is that we've found some time where Nina and Rachel can come in and do some of their content on psychological models. Reason being is that they've done far more work on psychological models than I have, and they'll be doing that stuff with you as you move into level 6 as well. So it just seemed a natural fit, and we've been able to find some time to work that out. So hopefully that's helpful. This week then, we're going to look at, really summarise what we've been looking at so far, which is the interaction between transitions and divisions. Okay, that for me summarises, packages up someone's life course. It moves in stages, but it also moves in relation to divisions. What might I be talking about when I say divisions?
You mean like when we work in, like going to work, having children, doing that kind of division? Is that more?
Not quite, so
No.
that's more of a stage for me, and what I mean by divisions is social divisions.
It's the inequality, isn't it?
So when you get
Kinda.
older, you separate from the group that you were with at a young age, find a new group and then try and integrate with them.
It could be, I see where you're going. But again, for me, still more of a transition.
Could it just be like culture, your wealth, like different divisions and that kind of?
Wealth, we're getting there.
Power,
It's class
money.
divisions.
Perfect. What we mean by a social division is class, ethnicity, gender, disability, age. Class, gender, ethnicity, disability, age.
Class, gender, disability.
Miss one. Class, gender, ethnicity, disability, age. There are more, but they are the 5 most prominent social divisions in society. Why do academics call them social divisions?
Because it's what divides people.
Absolutely, yeah. There is a clear division in terms of how people
Different.
in those groups are treated, the outcomes that they might have economically, and importantly for us, their outcomes in relation to health. We know that the person, and what these social divisions help us to do is identify risk factors. At the same time, they help us to identify where we might need to protect. So that's what we're looking at a little bit today, is risk and protective factors. But what we've discussed already through the life course is that people will experience these transitions differently on the basis of their divisions. We have been discussing that, haven't we? Yeah. Certainly in terms of class. But what we also find is that these divisions are helpful because they don't exist independent of each other. Okay, so we know that if you are to throw some of those divisions together, your health outcomes are likely to be worse than if you were subject to just one of those divisions. So we call that multiple jeopardy. Okay, multiple jeopardy. What does the word jeopardy mean?
Danger.
Yeah, danger, trouble. So there's multiple dangers, multiple risks. This stuff is really helpful. As I've said before, it's been used a lot in physical activity circles. So we know that if you add all of those divisions together, you arrive at your least likely person to be physically active. Go get them, Lorraine. So if we take, let's say, a disabled, elderly Muslim woman from a lower class community, that's our least likely person to engage in any form of physical activity. The statistics show us that. If we're trying to therefore improve our physical activity levels and our health outcomes, you might deliberately target that group, get to know and understand that group. What are their challenges? And I mentioned before, we've seen cases where people have gone in, understood communities, found out that one of the big barriers was that there's loads of swimming pools in the area, people would like to do it, but there's issues in terms of body coverage, there's issues sharing pools with men, that kind of stuff. You've understood the culture and you've addressed one of your big challenges. But yeah, so that's how this stuff can be really helpful. On the other side of that, other people take these divisions or take statistics and think, well, in terms of things like physical activity, there's a group in society who will always be active regardless what you do, as an organisation. There's a group who will almost never be active because of various barriers, various personality traits, interests, and there's a group who are not fussed either way, and some people target that middle group, because that's where they think they can have the biggest impact. But if we're thinking about health outcomes, this stuff is really important to understand divisions and understand the risks associated. So we're going to explore that a little bit further, what we mean by risk and protective factors, and then we're going to finally come to theoretical concerns again for adult health and in particular ageing. Happy that we've addressed that now, our division from last week. So social divisions are really social differences amongst ourselves. They're not random, but they're rooted in positions of power and advantage. Okay? If we think especially about gender and social class, what needs to happen for our society to be less divisive?
Equality.
Okay, so we're thinking about power. How do we get there? What has to happen to the power?
It has to stop that division between genders and money distribution.
Good. You've
wealth.
reworded what you first said.
Yeah.
What has to happen to the power?
Those in power have to relinquish some of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if we think about gender inequality, the only way we're going to see true equality is if men in powerful positions share their power. I'm not saying go around and saying here's some power, yeah, but being able to encourage women to also be in those positions.
But men are not going to do that. The women has to get the power by the horns and
No, I understand that,
Do
but,
it.
but in terms of campaigning, right, there's only so far you can go by saying, come on women, let's go, let's revolt. You also need men on board to release the power. Very similar.
Yeah, we could like do it as much as we could, but you need one of them to say, yeah, okay.
Absolutely, yeah. You do actually need them on board, and the power needs to be released. Really similar with social class. So we've got a highly unequal society in the UK, one of the most in the kind of first world, Western world certainly. Again, the only way that will ever change is if those in powerful positions are willing to release power, are willing to share the wealth.
that's never going to happen.
No, it's not, but if we're thinking about equality, right, that's what needs to happen. And we've proven again and again and again, you know, that graph that I like to fling up all the time, which charts equality of countries in relation to health outcomes, you know the one I'm talking about?
So Putin and that, it's the same thing, isn't it?
If you like, yeah. But, you know, that's what we show. If we can have a greater share of wealth, I'm not talking about a complete share of wealth, because as you said, that's completely unrealistic. But if we can, for example, tax higher earners and redistribute that wealth, we know that's going to be better for health outcomes. The research tells us that. Getting them to do it is a
never gonna
completely
happen.
different thing.
They always hit the less fortunate though, don't they?
Absolutely. And it will always be like that.
And this is it. So we are designed and apportioned within hierarchies. Yeah, we have set structures within society in relation to, quite clearly, class, yes, but gender also, but age. Why age? That's important for this week. Why age?
Because we kind of relegate the elderly to not being of any use, and we don't look after them the way we used to, just set them in a home.
It's kind of perceived as a burden, isn't it? You know, a lot of economists look at our ageing society and talk of it as if it's a really bad thing, a really negative thing. It's going to cause an economic strain. But the reason we've got an ageing society is we've had great advancements in healthcare. it should be celebrated, but economically it's slightly problematic. It costs a bit more. Sorry.
That's going to change a little bit, isn't it? With the working age having gone up sort of 10 years, you're required to work long before you can get a pension.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's going to have a massive knock-on effect.
Yeah. No, for sure. But I think this is the issue where we try and enmesh economics with health. A lot of big cities really focus on the economic growth of their region, and they think one way of addressing that is that they've got people. They look at people's healthy life years. Has anyone heard of that term before? What do we mean by healthy life years?
The peak of our health is supposedly sort of late 20s to sort of mid 30s, around about that area, and that's probably when you're most career driven, you're the most productive in society.
Absolutely. What about healthy life expectancy, which is different from life expectancy?
How long
No.
you're going to stay well?
That's it, yeah. But what they mean is, how long are you going to stay well enough to work? Yeah, that's what we really mean by healthy life expectancy. How long are you going to stay in health before you need to come away from work or you need to be in some form of care? And that's what a lot of city leaders focus on. So yeah, we do have quite an economic approach to age. As you say, Sarah, as soon as someone is deemed not able to contribute to the economy, to the workforce, we have quite a different approach to that person. Does that differ to some other cultures around the world?
Yeah.
Okay, I agree. Examples?
Japan is a big one. They very much respect their elders. They see them as having great value in being part of the greater network of the family, looking
Yeah.
after children.
Italy's another one, they're very much the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
So very much head of the families, highly the most respected person in the household. In the UK, there's a lot of stigma attached to ageing, basically, isn't there? There's a lot of work that goes into anti-ageing as well, from a body image perspective. So again, we're bringing in social theory straight away. There are stigmas attached.
I think in the UK lately, the ageing, people with ageing, say, kids don't have respect for the elderly or anything.
No, that's what we're saying, indeed, yeah.
Just because they can't work though, doesn't mean that they don't have value, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Wrong.
But that really is the root of our perception. There's stigma as well with just ageing in general. We're socialised into not liking ageing in this country. Yeah, I'm not saying that other countries aren't like that, but there is certainly more respect associated with age and ageing in other cultures. This term I find really important. We reproduce social hierarchies. Why reproduce? How do we reproduce? Not biologically now, but how do we reproduce social hierarchies?
I think.
Sorry.
No, go.
I mean, in this country, as in we've sort of removed the elderly down to the bottom and then somebody else, another level moves up.
That's out of the box thinking, not quite, but I like it.
Well, we just keep doing the same old thing, don't we? So we have a government who comes into power, who has a financial ideology that says finance filters down, which it doesn't, but that's their thinking. And so the people at the bottom are just going to stay at the bottom, and that financial policy just keeps replaying that same old story, and so nobody ever gets to move out of their social group.
That's exactly it, yeah. What we're saying is there's an ongoing cycle of social hierarchies here. Yeah, those at the top, subconsciously and consciously, work to keep the structures as they are. Through socialisation. This is what it means to be a woman. This is what it means to be of this ethnic group. This is what it means to be old. And through perhaps more deliberate actions.
Yeah, because of, in the news, like anything that's not in that social norm is always like in the news. And
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what
yeah.
I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
if you're old and you have a child, or,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
you're poor and then you've become this amazing business, you know, that's always,
Absolutely,
isn't it?
absolutely.
If you're out the norm, then it's always shown. Or
For sure, for sure.
Sorry, I just want to chip in because I love this quote. Khan has written a book called Natives, and it's about British class
Yeah,
and empire, and he talks about the fact that when a poor person does something, and specifically if it's a racial thing, then the world is up in arms and the UK is up in arms. But institutionally, when there is racism, we don't even look at it. And he says it's because poor people racism, bad.
yeah, yeah,
Rich people racism, good.
yeah.
And I just think that sort of sums up who we
Yeah.
are in the UK, really.
So we're according to these hierarchies, we're held to different social standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we see within communities as well, again in terms of this reproduction, this is some sociological research that's happened, but basically Norbert Elias, who's a theory we're going to look at, studied a community, it was in Leicestershire, that's where he was based, and he looked at, it was basically a community where it had 3 estates. One was an estate that had been there for quite a long time, that was well rooted within the community, had good social relationships amongst each other. Then you had 2 newer estates, one which were kind of higher cost housing, one which was more lower cost housing. And what they found is that the group that had a bit more cohesion, that had been there for that time, kind of worked on the basis of the best behaviour from their community was kind of symbolised what they were about. And the worst examples of behaviour from the newer communities were used as examples of what they're about. So, you know, you might have had one delinquent kid or adult that does something, and it's kind of, oh, they're all like that from there, that's how they are, that's how they act. Yeah, they're different standards to us. And that happens throughout all communities, doesn't it? And it's just a way of reproducing, whether subconsciously or not, these inequalities. And that's the only reason I'm flagging this now, because we've discussed it so much deliberately through the early sessions. You can't understand transitions without also reflecting on divisions, because we will all experience the transitions, but we will experience them differently in according to this stuff. So then we think about this term social stratification. You heard of that one before? Yeah, okay, cool. A division of population into unequal layers based on particular characteristics. So that's kind of the result of these divisions. We are socially stratified. And in some way, we are therefore socially excluded, right? So certain groups are denied access to what others consider normal rights and resources.
Normal rights, normal. For what one is normal, for the other is not, so...
Yeah.
Can of worms?
Yeah, that's why I've skirted past it. So social divisions, to summarise, mark the broad patterns and processes that produce forms of inequality and disadvantage. It's not hard and fast rule, it's a social pattern. Our transitions are a social pattern, and our divisions are a social pattern. There will be exclusions to these rules, but broadly, this is what we are expected to see. Age, then. I think it was you, Sophie, just mentioned kind of culturally, when someone older or from a lower class does something, it's kind of a big news story because it's outside of the norm. Media has a massive impact on our social divisions, and particularly age, I think. You know, how many comedy shows have got this kind of old, clumsy, older character that everyone takes the mick out of. I'm not going to rattle them off because we might all watch different shows. But you know, it's kind of just a given within comedy shows. Even things like there was a big storm. Strictly Come Dancing's on at the minute, right? That's my guilty pleasure on a Saturday. There was a big hoo-ha with that not so long ago because Arlene Phillips, who was the original female judge, got kind of pushed aside. Yet some of the older male judges have been there for years and years and years. This is our multiple jeopardy thing again. And people are pointing out that it's quite rare to be an older female and still be on the telly. Yet Bruce Forsyth was still there in his late 80s.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't that come under discrimination?
It does, yeah, absolutely. Where that comes from is socialisation, isn't it? Yeah. What message does that give people? It's perhaps not a deliberate message, but what message does it give people that we don't see many older women on the telly?
It comes across as if women are only there for their looks, and as they get older, they're not worthy of being on the telly because they're not good looking.
And that probably is the root, isn't it? Yeah. The media has a long history of sexualising and objectifying women.
And more BBC. BBC is known by doing that.
Yeah. Not just the BBC, but
More the BBC.
Okay.
Or at least the ones that are more talked about.
Yeah.
Possibly
Yeah.
the other ones can brush it under the carpet
Yeah.
and nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
But BBC is known by discriminating
Mhm.
against women
Mhm.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mhm.
Same with the film industry as well.
Is that the same with film industry?
They want to look at.
There are exceptions to this rule. I accept that there are there's people like Helen Mirren and things like that. But again, they're the exception to the rule, aren't they? Compared to the length of careers of male film stars and male newsreaders and dance judges, whatever it might be.
When Helen Mirren's on and she goes to an award show and she dies of a kink or something, it's like really traumatic.
Yeah,
She's got,
yeah, yeah.
That's how the media portray it.
For sure. So the media has a big sway, you know, on things like this, especially age. The media, it seems, is quite ageist. Why?
It's what sells. If you're already socialised into thinking that way, then if you try and sell a newspaper that doesn't buy into that,
Yeah.
no one's going to purchase it. So
Absolutely. They're trying to be popular, they're trying to be trendy, and it's an assumption that ageing is not trendy.
they need to keep going with social media try to be at the same level. Because when you scroll through TikTok or Instagram or something like that, you do see, I've seen it, 70-year-old women being TikTokers. But do they have a lot of views? Are they influencers?
If I looked at like some of them 70-year-old women, I'd be TikToking as well. Because in all fairness, some older women look really good for their age, don't they?
Yeah.
But that's
But-
because women, well, yeah, unless they've had things done, but a lot of women are.
There is a lot of them that
But
are
like
not
influenced to
afraid
get
of
things
show
done to
the...
an extent.
Yeah, but you know, that's the point really there, Laura, is that you should only be on TikTok if you manage to be old but look young.
Yeah.
We're socialised that way, yeah? Oh, you look a bit too old now, let's get you off TikTok.
I got into a stage that at my TikTok only seen fat women. That's the only thing that would appear on my phone. And I didn't understand why. So then I realized that I used to stop when they were dancing or something like that. And as soon as you stop more than 3 seconds on the same video, your feed will bring you everything similar to
Yeah.
that. So
You must like
I used to do that. I was like, what's going on here?
I can't explain that.
And clean swimming pools. I stopped. Do you know that USA swimming pools that they are stopped for months?
Maria, let's move on. Yes, so age is, as I said, a key organising difference, a key social division. Why is it social division? Well, it's because there are cultural elements to it. You know, if it was just a biological difference, then you might say, well, that's a way to organise people. You're younger, you're older. How do I know that? Your skin's different. Your body doesn't move quite as quick. But there's more to it. We have taken the biological differences from youth to adulthood to old age to mean things culturally. We've attached a meaning to them, and as we've already discussed, we've kind of attached a stigma to them. They're unwanted for some people. As we've said, we do have this ageing population, so there are an increasing number of older people who do not conform to stereotypes of old, aged and elderly. That's in relation to better healthcare, better nutrition, elements of exercise. Yet many do experience this social exclusion and marginalisation just simply because of the stigma of being old. There will be exceptions to this rule, but the stigma is there nonetheless. So that's our kind of first foray into social divisions, transitions, and how that might relate to ageing. Any questions on that so far? Question for you then, how might this division stuff relate to your essay?
Because all the transitions, the life transitions are different to a lot of people because of social class and all the other things that we have been discussing.
Great. So they're kind of overlapping
Yeah.
patterns in society, aren't they? We all go through different transitions, but we're all subject to divisions. And they will affect how we experience each transition. Great. So the other thing I wanted to talk about today was risk and protective factors. But by looking at these two patterns together, as I said at the start, we can identify greater risks. So we know, for example, by looking at multiple jeopardies, we know that there are areas, especially if we look across the life course, where someone is going to be at particular risk because of both their life stage and also their social divisions, the social divisions that they are subject to. Relating it to mental health as an example, this is a really good paper by Zimmerman and et al, I felt, looking at risk and protective factors in relation to anxiety. So they suggest that given the enormity of this, there's a need to examine factors that put individuals at risk, at particular risk of these disorders. So looking for high rates of co-occurrence, which will help us to identify underlying risks. What we mean by risk factors then, they're variables that present prior to the development of the disorder. So it's prevention, isn't it? It's looking at the situations people might be that might lead to anxiety. And these variables are associated with an increase in the likelihood of development of this disorder. It doesn't have to be anxiety, that's just the example that they refer to. It can be just as relevant for obesity, physical inactivity, diabetes, whatever. What are variables?
Depending on where you live.
What does the
your
term
class.
variables mean? I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
Changeable differences.
Yeah, changeable influences, stimulus, changeable factors, absolutely. So what factors, what things in society and someone's life are present prior to the development of the disorder? So in order to identify these, we need to understand people with these different disorders and look at the commonalities of their situation. So again, it's trying to identify patterns, particular variables that might lead to. So, good, that's where I was going next, Maria. What kind of variables might consistently put people at greater risk of anxiety?
Social economics,
Yes, good. So you go
Family.
straight to social divisions.
family background,
Sure.
all his adolescence and things. You need to look back to know more about the present, don't you?
Good.
So, yeah, basically,
Sounds like you've been sitting on this module for a couple of weeks.
yes.
So what we're really doing is looking for greater probability. Yeah, we're not ever saying that a person in this situation, well, they're bound to develop anxiety disorder, but we're looking at increased probability. So we're looking at things that are causally related to the chosen issue. Importantly though, what Zimmerman et al. Point out is that there may be a greater set of broader factors that stem from this. So really these risk factors should be used as the first step in identifying issues, but then also thinking about what might these issues also impact on. So Maria, you said social economic status. When you said family, what did you mean by that?
Your environment,
Okay.
right? If you are the head of the family,
Yeah.
you're going to be much more disposed to have anxiety because you don't have money to pay the bills or you don't have a house.
Behaviour as well, mightn't it, from family?
For sure, absolutely. Okay, so genetics and
Genetics
but,
as well,
but also
yeah.
elements of socialisation, absolutely.
Traumas in the family, things
Sure,
like if
sure.
you are born with the parents that have anxiety, it's much more normal for you to have
Yeah.
anxiety as well.
Absolutely. So these are kind of first step issues that might lead to anxiety disorder. But what these issues might also mean is that we are performing other unhealthy behaviours. It might mean that we're less physically active than we might have been because we don't have the motivation, the time, the money, which then creates this ongoing cycle and this increasing stem of issues. So when we're talking about risk factors, it doesn't mean that if we address those risk factors in some way, the issue's gone. But it helps us identify the first steps. And we then need to think wider and think what else is going on here. What might these first steps be impacting on?
I just think I had one consultation with a counsellor once many moons ago. And I remember, and now I understand why the question that I was going through a bad time at that time, and it was in work, and he asked me about my growing up and things like that. He wanted to understand, and I just got up and left because
Why do you need to know that?
exactly. So I'm here to talk about one thing and never gone back again.
Yeah.
But now I understand why.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How does this relate to your essay?
This is really going to get the information from, isn't it, to delve deeper into the subject.
Yeah, for me, this is what your essay is about.
It's the depth
Yeah,
of
your essay is about going through different life transitions and reflecting on, in relation to your chosen issue, what might be the risks of that life stage. What protective factors might we need to consider and promote at that life stage? So in your case there, you know, when you're saying you're taking on different roles within the family, as you know, as health practitioners, we can't take away those roles within the family.
No.
Yeah, if you've got 4 children, we can't just take one away for an hour and give you a bit of a break. But what you can do is promote greater resilience. What you can do is encourage them to find time to be physically active. So there might be a bit of mindfulness
take the
involved,
kids
but
with
then
you.
also we know that physical activity is really good for our serotonin levels.
So in the essay, when we're writing about each transition, so we can add in ways that might help that person in that situation too.
If you want to, absolutely. But I wouldn't delve too much into protective factors, because what we're trying to do more is explain the risk factors and why they're there.
Okay.
Good question, that is.
Do you have
Because, sorry, go on.
Do you have to pick a particular issue, or can you like base it on like gender through the life course? Or
The brief requires you to look at a health behaviour.
okay. I suppose you could pick a gender, but on a behaviour, would it be too much?
You're trying to complicate it there.
Yeah.
What you could point out, you know, at the core of this essay, it's transitions, behaviour and theory. They're the three things that have got to be there. So throughout different life transitions, how does that transition affect that behaviour? How can we explain that in relation to your
So
theory?
you mean
or
like
model?
if you chose like physical activity?
Yeah.
Don't do like physical activity with males. Like you do it.
What you could do is say if you chose body image, right? You chose body image and nutrition. So body image and eating disorders. Adolescence is a really interesting, a really important life stage there. It would be important as part of that to mention gender, I think. 'Cause you could-
but both, you know, it's not
Yeah,
just,
but only where it's relevant.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just said that the 3 points of the essay would be transition, behaviour and
Theory. Explanation. When I say theory and model, what we're saying is an explanation, simply explaining why at that life transition that is a particular risk.
That's
How
different
has that risk got there?
between the critique, the discuss. It's an explanation based on facts.
It's a discussion based on research. Yeah.
Chris, I am a bit confused about the behaviour. When you say behaviour, are you meaning specifically lifestyle choice behaviours? Smoking, drinking?
Preferably yes. Yeah. What were you thinking there, Sarah?
Well, I don't know, it's just confused me a little bit because I think a few weeks ago when I said something about depression, you said yes, that would be a behaviour, but it's not really behaviour. So that's kind of left me a bit confused again. So it is very specifically addressing those lifestyle issues that arise.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I see what you're saying. Back a couple of weeks ago, we said that it could be a health behaviour or a health issue.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm still very much firm on that being okay. What we can't do is do an essay on gender, because that's neither a health issue or a health behaviour.
Okay.
So you can do it on teenagers.
Is that a health issue or a health behaviour?
Behaviour.
Is being a teenager a behaviour?
Through the life course. Oh, yeah.
No.
No?
No, it's a life transition.
Oh,
So say if like you're doing a health behaviour or a health issue, how would you talk about that when, if you're talking about the transition of like a baby in the mum's stomach, how would you talk about that? If their personality...
It's another really good question. What do you think the answer's going to be?
Don't do that one.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I'm very happy for you thinking about risk factors to say that for my issue / behaviour, these are the key in terms of risk factors, life stages to focus on.
You don't need all the life. All the life
You don't need to do
stages
the
if it
entire
doesn't-
life
yeah.
course. You're thinking about the greatest risk. At the same time, you've just already mentioned how depression and anxiety can be linked to family behaviour, can be linked to genetics. So you could do it on that, but you're quite right, you'd probably be better focusing on other life stages. Adolescence, adulthood, increased pressures, mortgages, whatever else, retirement, massive change of identity. Yeah? Does that all start to make a bit more sense? Everyone happy with that for now?
You are never going to have a yes, like,
No, but I'm
Answer.
happy for you to tell me that you're unhappy.
yes. I think it's a still, this module is confusing. And it makes you think, and if you get on the right path at the beginning, it's fine, but if you start confused, you ended up confused, so
Overthinking
What would you
it.
class as
Isn't it?
a health behaviour?
That's me.
What would you class as a health behaviour? Can you give like some examples?
Physical activity, healthy eating, smoking, alcohol. They're the biggies. Yeah?
So that's what we could talk about.
You can expand beyond that list, that's just some examples.
That's got a flow throughout the whole of your transitions.
Yeah,
That, okay.
yeah.
so a kid who comes from parents that smoke, I'm a much more
Majority are going to smoke.
think
Absolutely.
gonna-
So,
he's
let's
gonna
say,
smoke. It's
so-
normal. It's a normal behaviour from a kid who comes from parents that are completely healthy, go to the gym, don't smoke, don't drink, don't do anything. So it's much more viable that that kid is going to be much healthier,
Yeah.
not smoking,
Yeah.
not drinking.
Yeah.
But then he hits adolescent
Mhm.
and he's going to get mixed with another social environment where all the kids smoke and drink and do that.
This is the story. You are telling the story. Yeah? You're not picking a particular person, but you're telling the story of a pattern.
Yes.
Yeah? So in this life stage, family are really relevant. In this life stage, peers are really relevant. In this life stage, you've got family pressures, all that kind of stuff. So you're telling that story. That's the central thread of your essay. That health behaviour, in your case smoking, through different life stages. What might the risks and the explanations of adopting smoking be?
Because they could carry it on in the family if a smoker is a smoker. then-
Exactly. So we know it's bad for us. We're told it's bad for us from early socialisation, but there are still risks of adopting it. That's exactly the pattern that we'll discuss. In terms of theory, what you're talking about there is a lot of socialisation and habitus. So that's how you would structure that essay. It's an essay on smoking through the life course that's explained through theory.
There is research about it. There is research for kids smoking early as 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
Can I just share an article I read that was done by Cambridge University? They did an article on some research that was done about people who, at the age of 14, who have reduced brain matter in the prefrontal cortex, generally end up smoking. Even when they do brain imaging as people get older, the point that they always come back to is there was a difference in their brains at the age of 14. Which, I mean, they don't causally link that to ACEs or
Smoke,
childhood
no.
social environments or whatever. And I was trying to find the article now just to see if they did pinpoint
Yeah.
that. But it would be interesting to
Yeah.
see if by the age of 14, your brain has been so impacted by your environment that actually you are more likely to smoke.
Scary.
Very interesting.
It's really interesting.
When I was a teenager, I hated smoking. I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
But then I got in with the mixed wrong crowd, and all of a sudden I just thought, well, go on, have a
Go on
try.
then.
I used to be the wrong crowd. I used to be the wrong crowd because
I'm probably in that.
I started smoking very early just to be spiteful. It
Okay.
was.
Spiteful towards
towards family because they were all full of big norms and big.
Socialisation.
Exactly,
So
hierarchies and-
rejection of socialisation.
They
So
would
that,
all.
we can better explain that one psychologically, and I'll come on to that at the end of the session. Rebelling.
Yes,
Yeah?
Yeah.
that was me.
I'll come on to that at the end of the session. Okay, so physical activity is another example, I think. We can explain physical activity through the life course. Through childhood, you're incredibly dependent on parents, what parents take you to, what they're interested in, what they can afford to take you to. Thinking about last week, do you remember Sharon's research on the time, resources that families can put into their child? As you move through to adolescence, you're quite heavily guided by school approaches, what your peers do, and then we know that at age 16 there's a massive drop-off in physical activity levels. So therefore I'm moving into the adulthood life transition where it's very much off your own back. Yeah, so again, they're the kind of themes that I would be discussing. Okay, let's head on a break. If we come back at 22, quarter of an hour break.